Hi, video diary. So it's St. Patrick's Day. Um, in New York City, it can go either way. I needed a musician for a project I'm doing. So I just put my feelers out and found somebody who is not much older than my son would be. And I just had to vet this person on the phone, gauge through some emails, exchange some tunes, some websites, some information, some texts, and you kind of get a sense about somebody, pretty quickly, sometimes right away, that it feels good, or not so good. I think it's very important to listen to those messages, because we often want something to be something it isn't. And usually the way something starts is the way it ends, just with people. In fact, I'm guilty of this all the time, where I'm trying to turn people into something they're not for my own reasons. This has largely been played out in my life in musical situations. I'll turn roommates and partners, unlikely, willing people into bandmates. Or not willing people into bandmates, and then sometimes I tried to make unwilling people comply to my wishes, my desires. And I found myself doing this without even realizing it. And then feeling resentment towards people when they don't, match my expectations. So it sounds so obvious now, but when you're doing things, you don't always realize it. And then if it has to do with things that are close to your sense of vulnerability, or you're precious about them in some way, then you're extra sensitive to how other people treat you, and it may not be personal, or it may be personal, and that's okay. Not everybody has to want to work with you, with me, vice versa. It's a pretty sound. Interesting. But the thing is, I was thinking about talking to this guy on the phone, and how clear he was that he was in New York to play music, and jazz in particularly, and had a real set goal about what that means for him, but in a broad sense, in an open-minded kind of sense, like in love with the music kind of way. And I have people my son's age who work for me, and I get to interact with some very brilliant young people, people in their 20s. But it made me think and feel like, why couldn't this be Forrest? Like, how come Forrest didn't make it? And this guy did. And to be sure, he had real sense. This guy has very clear sense of his love for the music and his desire to play and to deepen that experience of being a musician, which I think the reason people get so, if I may, hooked on it is because it is, you live in the now. Like when you're playing, and particularly when you do improvisational music of, you're in this moment because you can't be thinking too far ahead. Let's say anytime I planned what I was going to play in a solo, it never works, and I've heard that from a lot of people. So there's a sort of letting go that you have to do and find your path, and maybe the path finds you. Like you just discover what pathways are already there, and it's a combination. It's an interplay between my emotions and just the moment. And the moment can change at any moment. Any musician in the ensemble can surge, can punch it, and there's an exciting opportunity that presents itself, and you can chase that down or abandon it. There's all kinds of. It's an infinite. And maybe it's not infinite. Maybe it's just like what every single now moment is like. Like just this moment, which is really the only thing that exists. Like everything in the past is in my brain, doesn't exist here. And everything in the future I'm just projecting that. It's the next now moment. So this is necessary to cultivate comfort with this situation, with that state, to play this kind of music. I'm finding probably any kind of music or dancing. I mean, it's like, or anything that you have to, have full awareness and flow. I'm sure other people would find it in their respective disciplines, and maybe that's the key word. It's what got me here was discipline, really hard work, and I knew I would get there. It sucks to be doing this without my son, because we would talk about this all the time. Why couldn't it be my son who survived and had a vision? And I was thinking, like, did he ever have like a very powerful vision that was his own? Because he had talent, and he really pursued the MMA. He had 2 fights and then a couple of demo fights, or maybe 3 fights. He was on camera. He experienced all that. He won one of them and lost the other, or the other 2, but very closely. He was impressive. But I noticed that, that's really, really hard work And when he got hit in the head a few times, I think he realized, like, this is, something you have to sign up for. So maybe there wasn't, he loved jujitsu and training and all that stuff, but I don't know if he said, like, to himself, like, hey, I want to be a writer, or I want to be a painter, or a guitarist. And he could have been any one of those things, or he could have been something else to his liking later. I kind of backed off that stuff so that he just didn't have to feel, after a certain point, like, look, if you want to play guitar, I am here. If you want to study anything, I'm here to help you. Looking back, I would have to, I feel now that he never lost the desire for heroin. Like, I think it was just always there now that I look back, because I was never not I tense about that. I always had anxiety about that, less and less as years went by, but never gone, because he's still young, he's just a human being. He made a decision to use heroin. And it feels to me like similar to a decision that I once made when I was his age, where I quit a job and I hitchhiked, which was incredibly crazy now, to a jazz program where I got to study with Tuck Andrus. And then I studied with him privately in California. And I remember that, like, I was like, I am letting go and accepting myself for what my deepest desire is. If Forrest really wanted to paint art, he would have had art going on all over his room. He was writing a lot in the context of school. But how much did he assert himself beyond that? He trained super hard and helped other people with their training camps, but I don't feel that he, like, I think he had this thing, like, if I don't become an MMA fighter, that I've somehow not attained the full realization of that. And so he had to, at one point he committed himself to that, had some fights, and I said, well, you might rethink it now and move towards something else. So what? I was asked if I wanted to compete recently, and I don't know if I do, just because a match is not a real fight. And sometimes people forget that, and they'll crush your hands. And yeah, so it's like we all have to, I realize ultimately I'm super honored to have these, and as depressed as I've been over my son's death, I can do something that almost, that very few people can do. No, that anybody can do. It's just that I've been doing it for 40 years. And I don't know anything. Everything I think I know, I'm wrong about. So that's where I'm at.